get going. We are recording. Good. All right. So welcome, everybody, to the Unitarian Church in Charleston's Forum series. And I'm really, really pleased to have Professor Giovanna De Luca here with us today. She's going to be talking about Italian cinema, or cinema, right? And Giovanna has been at the College of Charleston since 2004. She's been running, in addition to teaching at the College of Charleston, which is a full-time job, she's effectively given herself a second full-time job for the last 15 years of running this Nuovo Cinema Italiano festival, which has developed into essentially the biggest Italian cultural festival, certainly in the Southeast, probably in all American university campuses. And it's a really big deal. She has a dozen or so movies every year here in Charleston that people can go and watch. She brings directors, she brings producers, she brings actors to Charleston for people to talk to in panel discussions about the films that they've made, and so on and so forth. It really is a spectacular event and something that really adds enormously to the cultural environment of Charleston. Just a little bit about Giovanna. She was born in Naples, so she's a Neapolitan. That does not mean she has 3 stripes across her, which is, I think, what people understand by Neapolitan in the United States. But she's certainly a wonderful, wonderful person. She lived for 10 years in New York City, which is, I think, why she wanted to start the Italian Film Festival, because New York, of course, is a very metropolitan, cosmopolitan place with all sorts of foreign influences going on all the time. And Charleston is a little sleepier than that, a little bit more parochial. And so she basically wanted to inject Italian flavor into the city, and she has done that spectacularly. She's also a scholar of Italian cinema, and so we are really, really lucky to get the benefit of her amazing expertise and experience here today. So Giovanna, I will turn things over to you. I think you have screen sharing, right? So please take it on from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're so wonderful and nice as always. Thank you very much. Okay, let me see if I find my stuff here. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm using here let me see if I find this again. You know, a PowerPoint, because if we talk about cinema, we want to see a little bit of, you know, of what we're talking about. Maybe this is it. Let me see, because I forgot. Let me see if this is my, yeah, that's it. Okay. So I want to just thank all of you this morning for being here. I don't know if it's very early for you or not, but this is good to talk about Italian cinema early in the morning. It's fine. I'm always happy to talk about that. So what I did today, I just, you know, organized a little bit some, you know, major points about Italian cinema, but especially Italian cinema after the Second World War. And the reason is that you know, silent Italian cinema has been very successful at the beginning in the 30s with independent companies of productions. Italians had, like, you know, until the 30s, until the 1931st, the 20s and 1931st, they had at least 9,816 film produced. And this can be understood by the fact that Italy is a visual, you know, country where visuality is very important, you know, arts, and we know this very well, you know, Giotto and Raffaello. So there is this big tradition. So clearly cinema worked very well during the silent period. And the major private companies were in the north, in Turin, Naples, and later only with the fascists in Rome. uh, in the phenomenon of divismo, of the diva as we have it today, was born in Italy with these silent film famous actresses. So we have a good background in silence, in terms of silent cinema. But then there was a crisis in 1931, and really we didn't produce anything. And then Benito Mussolini and his brother decided that we needed to, basically Italy needed to use cinema, because one of the best, it's the il cinema è l'arma più forte. He said the cinema is the strongest weapon, and of course for propaganda. And for this reason, he and his brother Vittorio, they created the Cinecittà Studios, that are the biggest studios we have in Rome, biggest studios in Europe. And later we know that also Americans, Hollywood came to Italy to shoot films in the Cinecittà Studios, because of course also they were, were cheaper. So the Italian cinema, however, in the world is known exactly because there was a kind of a attack in contrast with this propaganda cinema that had been running until during the war, especially through Cinecittà Studios, and where, of course, the majority of films were censored. So when do the world start to pay a lot of attention to Italian cinema? It started with the cinema of neo-realism, the neo-realistic cinema, and which was the cinema that started immediately after actually immediately after the Second World War. Cinecittà Studios, that have been used also by famous Italian neo-realist filmmakers. Cinecittà Studios had been, first of all, bombed partially, and then they had been used for some years as shelters for refugees. Many of these refugees, we're talking about refugees from also Jewish refugees, for example, that were coming from Ethiopia, Italian refugees, or the majority, I have to say, they were Jews. So they had been used for shelters, and then later, after neorealism, again in the 50s, Italians filmmaker went back to use the studios. But the fact that the studios were basically were closed, people could not make film anymore there, brought Italian filmmakers. One of the first was Roberto Rossellini, to think about outside the box. So first of all, so we are talking about the afterwar period. We're talking about 1945, and this neorealistic period didn't last too long. It lasted 7 years, 8 years, because it was a result of what people needed to say to the rest of Italian, wanted to say to the rest of Italian. It was a call to witness what Italian had been doing during the war, how they had, they resisted the war, how the partisans play an important role in the liberation of the country. And I was telling Simon before that today is a very important day for Italy, because we celebrated the 25th of April, the liberation of the country. But it was also, in terms of technical terms, a different way of approaching how Italians were supposed to make films. And there is not Cinecittà Studios. Italy is completely destroyed economically. where do we make these films? So where do we, the Italian filmmaker can make this film? Rossellini had been working also under the fascist regime with and he was making about biopics, so very important figures, and he was shooting a film about an Italian pilot, but then he stopped, and so they had to think about, what to do. I mean, now that the war was almost over, and the country was completely desolated. So uh, they started with some donation, which is unusual in Italy. There's this lady, the first neorealist film can be considered Rome Open City. There's this lady who wanted to support Rossellini so that he could make a film about a priest, Don Morosini, who died during, died to protect the partisans during the war. And so Rossellini, accepted. And after a while, they didn't have stock to shoot films. They could not go in, private settings, in the studios. So these really economic necessities, but also the desire to tell the story to people, what had been happening during the war. That, let's not forget, that was, many of these informations in terms of cinema were forbidden. The real stuff, they were censored. And so basically he shot this famous film, Rome Open City, open air, post-synchronized sound, so not studios, not many professional actors, and of course talking about something very important for Italians, that was, how they, they unify during the war to commonly fight the enemy. This is a topic that, can be also, challenged. The Italians didn't have any leader figure anymore. Before, there was the Pope, then the church. Now the church is not important anymore. Then there was the fascist dictator. And now there is nothing. There is not even unification. So this film represented a lot for Italians in in terms of a rediscovery of this humanity. This humanism is very important for in Rossellini's film. So he shot these three films that we can call the Rossellini war trilogy. And the first, of course, is Rome Open City, 1945. And why this film later? Because then the definition of this neorealism was applied a little bit later, because at the beginning it was just, a phenomenon that came almost natural. Why this is not 100% a neorealist film, the first film? Because we have professional actors. Anna Magnani was already known. Aldo Fabrizi, also, who interpreted the role of the priest, was a known figure. So we, we see something a little different compared to other neorealist films, where the choice of the actors as non-professional actors was at the basis of a neorealist cinema. So and there were also like these children that were used, non-professional actors. There was an integration, and then some of the films were also shot in studios. The other thing why this is not really absolutely a film that 100% neorealist because, for example, there is a clear distinction between good and bad. The Germans are very bad, Italians are good, fascists, they don't come out so bad. So there is a little, you know, it's a little more, falls more the standard of a filmmaking. This is the famous scene when, you know, Anna Magnani was assassinated, the Sorapina was assassinated because she was following Francesco. And this humanitarian, you know, these humanities that transpire in this film is, you know, the objective of Rossellini. There is an image before this. I don't know if I can go and check this film because it's in which, I have to reshare. This is what we do here with the films. Okay. So can you see this? Yes. Okay. So basically, fascists goes in this building to pick up these partisans.
Secondo me ci sono nel Middle East keine Männer aufzutreiben, das ist doch Quatsch.
Dove sono gli uomini in questa casa?
Avete capito? Dove sono gli uomini? Ma che ne so io, mica faccio il portiere. Alt, lo svedere.
Che vuole quello là?
Devo andare, c'è un malato che ha bisogno di conforto.
Okay, I'll put this a little further so that we can see the scene. There is also irony in the film. This is a famous, which is comedy, which is interesting.
Cent'anni alla faccia, ragazzi stanno arrivando, i tedeschi, ma io me ne frego dei tedeschi e dei fascisti, io gli faccio dammi, la faccio.
So they, you know, he gives a head, you know, he hits the old man so that they pretend that the guy is the guy's dead, and that's a famous sequence. Okay, why this film is also a film that is considered, you know, that promote the concept that of Christian humanism is clearly representing this in that sequence when you know the priest holds La Signora Pina. Because it reminds of the Madonna and the Pietà, no? The Michelangelo. So there are many references to these, you know, this Christian humanism that Rossellini wanted to promote. Can you see this one or not? Did I go back to the screening here? Can you see this? I don't know. Yes. Oh. It's okay.
We're good, Giovanna. We got the publicity slide at the moment.
Okay. So then the second film that he directed, Rossellini, this was a big success. The second film he directed, always part of the trilogy of the war, is in 1946. Was basically, you know, solicited by Americans and was about the participation and the liberation of Americans of the Allies in Italy, starting from Sicily, going up to the north, 6 stops. A very interesting film. I mean, after they were, you know, there was decided that, you know, Americans could not deal with the Italians and the delays of Italians. And and Rossellini taking too much time, etc. So at the end, it was a production mostly made by Italians. This is a neorealist film in the sense that follows the canons, not professional actors. All the languages are used here, English, because of course these people, Americans were speaking English, Sicilian were speaking with a Sicilian accent. Naples, the same thing. And was shot completely outside, not in a studio. What is represented in this film, which is very, very interesting, is the gradual understanding of each others, both Americans and the Italians, and because at the beginning they were received with a lot of, they were very suspicious, Italians, about the Allies. But then the film is a structure that at the end there is always a sort of disappointment, because you think, oh, okay, now they are contacting each other, there's a contact, and then there is something else that happened that destroyed this expectation. This is also another thing typical of a neorealist cinema, of these open endings. So at this point, we can see this gradual knowledge of each other grows until at the end, the Po Valley, where the partisans and the Americans fight together against the German and fascists, and then they. And then the Americans also, they die together with the Italians. So it's very interesting because after this, the film then concludes saying after these last assassinations that basically after 3-4 days, Italy was free. This episode is one of the most challenging episodes, because this is the Naples episode. This is episode in Sicily, one in Naples, Rome, Florence, then one in the Apennines, Emilia-Romagna, and then the last one in the Veneto region. This one is interesting because there is, in terms of racial situation that Rossellini already got it at the time. These two, this child, the famous Scugnizzo, Neapolitan Scugnizzo, scoundrel, he's trying, or rascal is trying to, he has no mother or father, is trying to steal from Joe. And Joe gets drunk, and the child manages to steal his boots. But there is a nice episode where Joe believes that he's, there and to live free, the country. But then he realizes that in his home he won't go back as a hero, because he would go back in his shack. And there is also another interesting reference to race, which I found very interesting, consider when this film was shot. So with this film, Fellini was known everywhere. Germany Year Zero, maybe my favorite film, even if I don't teach it. This was shot in 1948, and Rossellini felt that he needed to also shoot this film in Germany, because yes, Italy was hit, and we could see the ruins and everything, but we should shoot it in Germany too. So the protagonist is this little child, is Edmund, who basically through these, they are starving there, of course, and he's trying to work, and through the psychology, what is revealed is the damages of ideologies and of teachers, of the masters, etc. And at the end, the situations in his family, and his a former teacher convinced him that in order for them to be okay, he was supposed to kill his father, who was sick. And then, of course, the child does that as a victim of this ideology, and then at the end he kills himself. This film is a really, a wonderful film. So then we have now already with this formulation, I mean, with the trilogy of Rossellini, we have the delineation of the movement. And so this movement of this neorealistic movement is supposed to create a new kind of cinema of a realist cinema. But of course, it's not a documentary, there's a story to tell. Non-professional actors, post-synchronized sound, and of course, stories that put at the center, the human factor, very important human factor immediately after the Second World War. And the person who thought about that, about neorealism as a movement, the theoretician, was Cesare Zavattini, who was also a screenwriter and a big collaborator of Vittorio De Sica. So this is the famous masterpiece, Bicycle Thieves, loved by everybody, copied also by Spielberg, the famous bicycles that we can see in the films, going all together of these in the street, have been big inspiration. This famous child that was selected because this is an important picture. The choice of a child was defined only by the fact of how he watched his father, and they selected a child who could follow and watch constantly his father. And there's an interesting story. This child became became a barber in New York, and he was the barber of my PhD professor, Robert Dombrowski, in New York. And then he came back in Italy. So this actor, he became, it's interesting. There's an interesting story, life story about this actor. This film was, of course, considered, a masterpiece. The story, I think everybody knows about, the father and son immediately after the war. And he was offered a job to, post these posters in the street, but he needed the bikes, so the wife sell all his their linens, in order to get money to buy back their bikes. And then the bikes is stolen. At the end, what he does, he steals a bike, but they got him because everything lasts only 3 days. They got him, but at the end, basically, the child saved him from the crowd, understanding the action of his father. Very famous, the sequence where the child at the end holds the hand of the father, was humiliated by the fact that he was caught up stealing the bike. There's a lot to say about this film, the father-son relationship, the figure of the father in Italian society at the time, how this child instead there was a reverse role. The child becomes more in charge of the situation rather than the father. But this is a film that has made history, as and we can go back if you desire. Okay. Then after this neorealism, everybody, there are many other films, neorealist films, especially by De Sica. But when another one was Visconti, Luchino Visconti. But after this period in which Italy was recovering also economically, we started another period in terms of cinema that's called the pink neorealism. Pink neorealism, why? Because Italy was slowly coming back from the economic, from disaster. So these are the beginning of the economic boom in the 50s. And so this was a period in which cinema, Cinecittà opened, the studios were open. As a matter of fact, the film was shot there, and partially, and there was a reflection of a course on realism, 100%, but also opening up towards a little more comedy and more reflection upon, a new status of Italian cinema. So these films by Luchino Visconti, the name is Bellissima, and Visconti was a particular kind of a filmmaker. He was an aristocrat, and then he went to study also in France, and then he was a Marxist, openly gay. And he made a couple of beautiful films, important, relevant films during neorealistic period. But then this is the first film where he detached a little bit himself from neorealism, and this is a criticism to this new upcoming, the lower middle class who wants to become famous through cinema. And this is a mother who's trying to do everything so that her daughter can become an actress in this film. So he also attacks a little bit in this film the film industry in itself. Anna Magnani is fantastic in this film. Visconti selected Anna Magnani because of her, because she was famous by now, even more famous, and she was an icon, represented these popular Roman mothers. Then we pass to the so-called cinema des auteurs. So after this little, this pink neorealism films, where we still have dramatic kind of realistic narratives. Now there is this more experimental kind of cinema. And one of the major representatives was Michelangelo Antonioni. Antonioni was also a painter, and with this Ferrara, from this also more artistic kind of a background. And he focused mostly in his films. The aesthetics in Antonioni's films is very, very, very relevant. But he focused about the isolation of human beings and the impossibility of communication. This impossibility of communication. So the films about, they are slow according to the famous standard, the cause and effect. They're full of pauses. As a matter of fact, students do not love Antonioni too much, but aesthetically are really amazing. And he focuses on the impossibility of the human being also interacting with the environment. So his muse was Monica Vitti, that we can see here. This is the final sequence of L'Avventura, a fake title because nothing happened, and this is L'Avventura. We cannot even talk about boredom, but more like ennui that was trendy in this period. Then we have my one and only Marcello with Federico Fellini talking about the cinemas of auteurs and people who really want to focus on the aesthetic of cinema. And Fellini, big collaborators, also Rossellini. He collaborated with the script also in some films. So he created also neorealist films. Huge, great caricaturist, and also he designed amazing vignettes. So after 3-4 interesting films, he basically became very, very important filmmaker with La Dolce Vita. And that's the famous sequence in which, La Dolce Vita, we have here when he calls, Anita Ekberg calls him Marcello. Let me see if I can find this. Okay, 1 second. Stop share before, and then I go here, and then I go here, and I go here.
Giovanna, we're getting a bit short on time. So
Okay, so no Fellini, you're right. Okay, you're right. The screen, we cannot do it. Allora.
Sorry.
See, no, you're right, you're right. So after Fellini, we have also 8½. And after 8½, we, that is a famous film about, impossibility of creating something new, especially after that this represents the crisis of Fellini himself. After La Dolce Vita, the problem of Fellini and his next film about La Dolce Vita, perfectly represented in 8½, referring to the number of films that he did. Another very important, so we identified neorealism, then we talked about pink neorealism. This is another very important element in Italian filmmaking production, which is a comedy Italian style. And the difference between comedy and comedy Italian style is that, again, this is comedy Italian style has a specific agenda to attack the middle class men who wanted to, want to climb the social class, the social climber. And of course, at the end, he fails. So it is comic, it is funny, and there is always a realistic component, but it's definitely social criticism involved. And of course, Marcello Mastroianni in the divorce Italian style, in many other films, also Wertmüller films, are inspired, they create this comedy Italian style. This is part of the backbone Italian cinema, neorealism and comedy Italian style, and still, even with updated format, they're still there, and they're still extremely relevant. And then we have instead the political cinema. And the political cinema is with the Bertolucci and, international cinema. We're really talking, seeing beyond. And of course, this is an attack of Bertolucci to, fascists, based also on the fascist ideology. What is unique here is this collaboration with the famous designer and a cinematographer, and the collaboration here is very clear and evident. So Il Conformista has been really, really a big success and represented the 70s and the new kind of auteurs. Then we have the spaghetti western. Why the spaghetti western was so good? Why was it so important? Sorry, the dog is here. Why it became so important? Because of course there was a crisis in America. It was cheaper to shoot in Italy. And in Italy, and actually many of these films were shot in Spain, by using also American actors. But what is interesting is that the spaghetti western started, of course, they could not create these filmmakers an extension of the American westerns, but they try to cite, a phenomenon of citation started, and with the citation, of course, a criticism. We can define this as the first element of a post-modernity, and with the, an irony reigns here. Famous collaboration with Ennio Morricone and Sergio Leone, one of the major representatives. Quentin Tarantino loves, of course, spaghetti western, was very inspired by spaghetti western, but spaghetti western also criticized, in a certain sense, the American history that was proposed through the western. So these cowboys were not liberators or or people that were on the side of the townspeople, but were equally could be both criminal and immoral people, so more realistic. There's also the good and the bad and the ugly, a criticism, of course, of the Civil War. And then we come today with this, film that are more with the international breadth. And one is The Great Beauty by Paolo Sorrentino, was 2013. Now, the two most international filmmakers we have now in Italy are Sorrentino and and Guadagnino, that we'll see later. And this Great Beauty is, the style of Sorrentino is very unique, very Baroque, but at the same time attacking some of the, the new trend of Italian culture. One is, one trend is that of the radical chic. So this is the story of this writer who from Naples goes to Rome, and he just wrote a big book, and then he started to participate to this vacuous social life, and then just to realize that, of course, that's not the real deal, that everything is pretty empty. Including the representatives, people from the Vatican, including the fake beauty of the art versus the real beauty of arts. It's all mingled together. This film has been criticized, or not criticized. I mean, there has been considered as derivative of La Dolce Vita, Fellini's La Dolce Vita, and Sorrentino say yes, that's true. But there are the first, elements that then will be recognized always as a Sorrentino's styles, like the famous surreal flamingos, pink flamingos on the terrace of the protagonist, Jep Gabardella. This internationalism is even more, fed by one of the latest, latest film by Guadagnino. Guadagnino was trained. This filmmaker has been trained in New York and NYU, international breadth. The writer was of the novel is Andrea Siman, and Guadagnino adapted this film. Italian criticized this film because they say that the Italians were considered as a secondary, they didn't have a prominent role. I can tell you why they were wrong, but this is the sentimental story of this coming of age of Timothée Chalamet, of Elio, and who discover, his loves and his sexual preferences. in this lovely part of Italy. The film was shot in Cremona, that is the the homeland of Guadagnino. And it is a really well delineated story about this sexual discovery and in a neutral environment, a little nostalgic, but a film that does not create opposition in any kind of viewer. So these are the latest trend of a more international cinema. These protagonists, of course, they're Americans. We don't have we have some Italian actors, but the majority are Americans. But the filmmaker is Italian. And then another phenomenon that is really of these days is that of regional cinema, Italian regional cinema, but with a wide breadth. Ho finito, I'm done.
Okay. we are really out of time. So if you wouldn't mind unsharing the screen so we can get on the gallery and we can see whether anybody has any quick questions for you.
Oh, okay.
That would be great.
Okay.
We've probably got about two minutes, so I don't know whether
Oh
folks
my gosh, I'm so sorry.
questions.
Okay.
One thing that struck out to me was I hadn't really thought about Italian cinema post World War II as a phenomenon. I wonder whether people have done any comparative studies of how Italian cinema is different from German cinema, is different from British cinema, is different from US representations between 1945 and 1950, let's say.
Yeah, there have been studies, definitely. There have been studies about that. And the thing about Italy, and that what is emerging is exactly that Italians decided they were the one who really had the tools or the inventiveness of creating this kind of cinema, exposing really the ruins of the world, and the immediacy was defined also by the lack of stuff. For example, they could not shoot twice because they had only one stock of a film. That's why it was so natural. That's why it became very, very natural. So to start at the time, but yes, there have been works about it.
I wonder, do you think you would be able to send me a list of those YouTube links? So if anybody's actually interested in checking out these films,
I can definitely,
and I can send them on the list of links because I think that would be very interesting to folks.
Yeah.
Anybody else got any quick questions for Giovanna?
Sorry, guys.
Laura just says grazie.
Grazie, scusate. I'm sorry.
Anything else from anyone? No? Okay, so thank you very much indeed, Giovanna.
I'm sorry I took all the time. I want to hear your voices. I'm so sorry. Oh.
Well, you know this stuff and we don't, so you're the person we had to listen to.
Oh, okay.
Next week, though, we go back to sort of more internal kinds of discussion with the forum, and we will be having a discussion about the 8th principle and the UUA's adoption of the anti-racist principle to add to our 7 existing principles. So please do tune in again for that. And in the meantime, thank you again, Giovanna.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Happy Liberation Day, everybody.
Liberation Day. Sorry. Bye-bye.
Bye.